You ever notice how the negative stuff in life doesn't just show up once? It stacks, it compounds, it clings to you until you forget what it feels like to be truly free. We carry old stories, old hurts, old fears like they're part of our identity, but they're not. They're just patterns we haven't broken yet. And today, right here, right now, you get to break them. You get to decide that the weight you walked in with, you're not walking out with, because the moment you release the negative stuff, you unlock a version of yourself you haven't met yet. Stronger, lighter, unstoppable. When you talk about releasing the negative stuff, the first step is recognizing the weight you're actually carrying. Most people go through life believing they're just tired, stressed, or overwhelmed, but what's really happening is that they're dragging emotional baggage they haven't acknowledged, let alone released. It's like walking through your day with a backpack full of bricks, wondering why your shoulders hurt, why your energy is low, why your motivation comes and goes. You think it's life beating you down, but in reality, it's the emotional load you never stop to examine. You can't let go of what you don't identify. And most people don't identify their negative patterns because they're so used to them. Pain becomes familiar. Stress becomes normal. Anxiety turns into a part of the daily routine. You stop questioning why you feel the way you do, and you start assuming this is just who you are. But it's not who you are. It's simply what you've been carrying. Think about the moments in your life where you felt rejected, betrayed, misunderstood, or not enough. Those moments didn't just disappear. They left marks. They created beliefs. Maybe someone told you that you weren't capable. And now every time you think about doing something new, that voice resurfaces. Maybe you failed once, and now failure feels like a part of your identity. Maybe you trusted someone and they let you down, and now you carry distrust into every new connection. This is the invisible weight that shapes your decisions, your reactions, and even your dreams. Recognizing the weight means slowing down long enough to look inward and ask, what am I actually holding on to? Because the truth is, most people don't even know. They think the problem is the job, the relationship, the money, the circumstances, but those are just surface triggers. The real issue is the emotional residue from the past that's coloring everything in the present. Ask yourself, what emotions show up for you again and again? Is it frustration, doubt, guilt, fear? Those emotions are clues. They point to the unresolved experiences you've never truly released. And the moment you become aware of these patterns, everything begins to change. Awareness is power. When you shine a light on something, you take away its ability to control you. The problem is that most people avoid awareness because it's uncomfortable. They bury themselves in distractions, scrolling, working, eating, staying busy, anything to avoid feeling what's actually going on inside. But ignoring the weight doesn't make it lighter. It makes it heavier. Ignoring the negative stuff only allows it to grow roots. The moment you decide to face it, something incredible happens. You gain your power back. You shift from being controlled by your emotions to understanding them. You stop reacting out of old wounds, and you start responding from clarity and strength. You begin to see that the weight wasn't there to punish you. It was there to teach you, to grow you, to show you the areas of your life that needed healing. Recognition is the first doorway to freedom, because once you see the weight, you can question it. You can ask, is this belief truly mine, or did I inherit it from someone else? You can ask, is this emotion connected to today, or is it coming from something I didn't resolve years ago? You can ask, is this fear real, or is it just an old memory replaying itself? And when you start asking those questions, the negative stuff loses its power. It stops being a shadow that follows you and becomes a story you understand. You begin to realize that some of the things you've been carrying weren't even yours to carry in the first place. The criticism you internalized didn't start with you. The doubt that holds you back came from someone else's fear. The pressure you feel comes from expectations you never chose. And the moment you recognize this, you can put those burdens down. You can say that story is not my story anymore. What once felt like a heavy load starts to feel like something you can finally release. Not by pretending it never happened, not by pushing it away, but by seeing it clearly, understanding it fully, and deciding consciously that you're done letting it define you. When you recognize the weight, you reclaim your ability to shape your own emotional state. You begin to understand that you are not broken, you're burdened, you are not failing, you're carrying too much, you're not weak. You've simply been trying to walk through life with obstacles strapped to your back that were never meant to stay there. And the moment you become aware of what's weighing you down, the process of letting go begins. Not from force, but from clarity. You don't let go because you must. You let go because you finally understand that holding on has been costing you your peace, your energy, your future. And once you see that clearly, you'll never carry that same weight again, because awareness doesn't just free you, it transforms you. And it all begins the moment you stop, take a breath, look inward, and finally recognize the weight you've been carrying for far too long. If you're going to release the negative stuff, you have to understand one powerful truth. Most of the negativity you feel doesn't come from the world around you. It comes from the patterns running inside your mind. You're not trapped by your circumstances as much as you're trapped by the loops of thought you keep repeating. Those loops become automatic. They run without permission. They create the same emotions over and over again until they feel unavoidable. But they're not unavoidable. They're patterns, and patterns can be broken the moment you decide to interrupt them. Think about how quickly your mind can shift. One moment you're calm, and the next one thought takes you down a path of stress, overthinking, or feeling not enough. It happens so fast you barely notice it starting. It begins quietly, a memory that pops up, a doubt that slips in, a fear whispering in the background. And then, before you know it, your whole emotional state has changed. Not because something terrible happened, but because you followed the path of that thought without stopping it. This is how negativity takes hold, not through big events, but through tiny mental habits that repeat themselves until they become familiar. And familiarity is dangerous because what feels familiar begins to feel normal. You start believing that's just the way you are when really it's just the way you've been thinking. If you want to break free, you have to interrupt the pattern before it becomes an emotional reality. Because the moment you interrupt it, you create space. Space to choose a new thought, a new focus, a new meaning. And that space is where transformation begins. You've probably had moments where you were spiraling mentally, but then something unexpected snapped you out of it. Maybe a friend called. Maybe someone made you laugh. Maybe you moved your body, changed your environment, or remembered something exciting. In that moment, nothing about your life changed, yet everything in your emotional state shifted in seconds. Why? Because your pattern got interrupted. This is the key. You can use intentional pattern interrupts to break the cycle of negativity anytime you want. You don't have to wait for life to distract you. You can take control of the shift. It can start with something simple. Change your posture, stand up, move your body, breathe deeper. These aren't random actions. They disrupt the emotional momentum that negativity feeds on. Your body and mind are connected. Change one and you influence the other. Or maybe you interrupt it with your focus. Instead of letting your mind run toward everything that cool, go wrong, you shift deliberately toward gratitude, opportunity, or something that energizes you. Focus is a powerful weapon, but most people aim it at the wrong target. Whatever you repeatedly focus on, you feel. Break the focus and you break the feeling. And then there's meaning. Every negative pattern is fueled by a meaning you attach to an experience. I failed, so I'm not capable. Someone left, so maybe I'm not enough. Things didn't work out, so maybe they never will. These meanings become emotional traps. But the moment you question the meaning, the pattern collapses. You can replace it with something more empowering, something closer to the truth, something that lifts you instead of limits you. You're not trying to deny what happened. You're simply refusing to let the meaning you assigned in a moment of fear define your entire emotional state. A new meaning creates a new pattern. A new pattern creates a new life. The challenge is that the old patterns are comfortable. They're familiar. They've been running for years, but the moment you interrupt them, consistently, intentionally, you weaken them, and eventually they dissolve. They stop being automatic. They stop being the default. Your mind begins to create new pathways, new emotional habits, new ways of thinking that align with the person you're becoming instead of the person you used to be. It's like retraining your emotional system. And yes, it takes awareness, it takes effort, it takes repetition, but it also takes a decision to stop letting negativity dictate the direction of your day. You're not a prisoner of your thoughts. You're the one who chooses which thoughts get to stay. Every time a negative loop begins, you have a moment, a tiny window where you can choose to interrupt it. That's your power. That's your leverage. That's your turning point. And the more you choose that interruption, your emotional patterns shift. Imagine how different your life would feel if you stopped letting a single thought ruin your mood. Imagine what would be possible if you stopped feeding the same narratives that drain your confidence. Imagine who you could become if you stopped rehearsing your pain and started rehearsing your power instead. This isn't about pretending everything is perfect. It's not about forcing positivity. It's about refusing to be dragged into the same emotional hole over and over again by a pattern that doesn't serve you. It's about waking up to the fact that you have more control over your inner world than you've been using. Negativity cannot survive without momentum. It needs you to follow it. It needs you to feed it with attention. The moment you interrupt the pattern, the momentum dies. The emotional energy collapses, and you reclaim your ability to choose how you feel. This is how you reclaim your peace. This is how you regain your power. This is how you take your life back from the loops that have held you hostage for far too long. Because once you learn to interrupt the pattern, negativity loses its grip and you take your first real step toward emotional freedom. When we talk about releasing the negative stuff, one of the biggest anchors people carry, often without realizing it, is the weight of past hurt. And the truth is, most people aren't living in the present. They're living in memories. They're living in old wounds. They're living in experiences that happened years ago, but still control how they think, how they react, how they trust, and how they show up today. What happened to you might have shaped you, but it was never meant to imprison you. Yet so many walk through life holding on to the pain as if letting go would somehow invalidate what they went through. But letting go doesn't erase the past. It frees the future. Everyone has a story that hurt them, a betrayal that cut deep, a moment where someone made them feel small, insignificant, or unworthy, a time when they gave their heart, their trust, their effort, and it wasn't respected or returned. These experiences leave marks, and if you don't resolve them, they become the lens through which you see everything. Someone hurts you once, and suddenly you expect the world to hurt you again. Someone rejects you, and suddenly every opportunity looks like another setup for disappointment. Someone lied to you, and now trust becomes a battlefield instead of a foundation. Holding on to that hurt becomes a protective strategy. You tell yourself you're being cautious, being smart, being strong, but in reality, you're building walls so high that nothing beautiful can reach you either. The pain becomes familiar, and familiarity becomes safety, even if it's suffocating, because at least you know what to expect. At least the hurt you know feels safer than the vulnerability you fear. But that's not living, that's surviving. And you weren't born just to survive. Letting go of past hurt doesn't start with forgiveness. It starts with understanding. Understanding that the pain is real, the experience mattered, but the meaning you've attached to it is what's keeping you stuck. You can't change what happened, but you can change the story you've been telling yourself ever since it happened. Maybe someone didn't value you, not because you weren't valuable, but because they didn't know how to value anyone. Maybe something didn't work out, not because you were unworthy, but because life was redirecting you to something bigger. Maybe someone walked away, not because you were too much, but because they weren't enough for the level of love you were ready to give. When you shift the meaning of the memory, you take away its power. You stop reliving the moment as a wound and start seeing it as wisdom. The pain you live through becomes the strength you stand on. The disappointment becomes the reason you raised your standards. The heartbreak becomes the reason you learned your worth. And suddenly, something that once hurt you becomes something that now builds you, but you can't reach that transformation as long as you're gripping the hurt with both hands. And most people don't realize how tightly they're holding on. They replay the moment in their mind. They talk about it. They think about it. They allow it to shape their identity. They allow it to define what they believe they deserve. Pain becomes a home they visit daily, even when the door to freedom is standing wide open. You let go the moment you decide the past doesn't get to control your emotional destiny anymore. You let go the moment you refuse to let someone who hurt you once continue hurting you through your memories. You let go the moment you stop letting old stories determine your new opportunities. The past is not your home. It's a place you lived, learned, and outgrew. You don't need to keep unpacking your bags there. Some people struggle to let go because they think it means the pain didn't matter. But letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without reliving. It means acknowledging without absorbing. It means accepting the chapter without dragging it into every new page. And some people hold on to pain because it became part of their identity. They don't know who they would be without it. But hear this clearly. You are not your wound. You are not your mistake. You are not the person someone else failed to see. You are the person who survived it. You are the person who grew through it. You are the person who has the power to create what comes next. Letting go becomes easier when you realize it's not just emotional, it's physical. Hurt changes your posture. Your energy, your tone, your confidence. It literally shapes the way you move through the world. And when you release it, your entire being shifts. There's a lightness that returns. There's a peace that rises. There's a strength that awakens. You stop bracing for pain and start opening for possibility. And the greatest part, when you let go of past hurt, you make space for something new to enter. You make space for new love, new trust, new opportunities, new joy. Pain takes up space, and the moment it leaves, growth fills the room. You stop reacting from your history and start responding from your truth. You stop expecting hurt and start expecting hope. You stop protecting your heart and start empowering it. This isn't something that happens overnight. It happens in moments, micro decisions, emotional shift. Every time you choose to stay present instead of revisiting the past, you loosen the grip of the pain. Every time you choose gratitude over resentment, you weaken the memory's hold. Every time you choose healing over repeating the same story, you reclaim your power. And eventually, the moment comes where you look back at what once broke you and realize it no longer defines you. It no longer controls you. It no longer weighs you down. It becomes part of your story, not your sentence. Because the moment you let go of the hurt that no longer serves you, you finally create space for the life that truly does. If you're truly going to release the negative stuff, you have to understand one of the most powerful forces in your emotional life, the meaning you attach to things. Nothing in your life has any built-in meaning. Events happen, people act, situations unfold, but the meaning you assign to those things determines how you feel, how you react, and ultimately who you become. Meaning is the invisible filter that shapes your entire emotional experience. And most people don't even realize they're the ones assigning it. Two people can go through the same situation and walk away with completely different emotional realities. One person sees a setback as proof they're not good enough. Another sees the same setback as a lesson, a redirection, an opportunity to grow. The event is the same, the meaning is different, and meaning is what creates the emotion. Emotion drives behavior. Behavior shapes destiny. That's why replacing negative meaning is one of the most powerful skills you can ever develop. When something painful happens, most people do what their mind has been conditioned to do, attach the worst possible meaning. You fail at something and the mind says, see, you're not capable. Someone leaves your life and the mind whispers, you're not worthy. Something unexpected happens and the mind jumps to, you never get what you want. These meanings aren't facts, they're habits, old emotional patterns, leftover beliefs from past experiences, echoes of voices that weren't speaking truth, but were speaking through fear, insecurity, or their own unresolved pain. The problem is that once you attach a meaning, your brain looks for proof of it everywhere. You filter life through it. If you decide you're not worthy, suddenly every challenge feels like confirmation. If you decide you're unlucky, suddenly every minor setback feels like evidence. If you decide you're unwanted, every neutral expression starts to feel like rejection. Meaning becomes the story you live inside. But here's the breakthrough. You can change the meaning at any moment. You don't need permission. You don't need the situation to be different. You don't need anyone to apologize or explain. You just need to choose a meaning that empowers you instead of breaks you. This is not about pretending everything is perfect. It's about choosing a meaning that fuels your growth instead of your pain. Because the moment you shift the meaning, the emotion shifts with it. You're not trying to erase what happened. You're trying to transform how it affects you. Maybe that failure wasn't proof that you're not enough. It was proof you were stretching beyond your comfort zone. Maybe that relationship didn't end because you were unlovable. It ended because you were meant for something healthier, something aligned, something real. Maybe that setback wasn't a punishment. It was preparation. Maybe that person didn't betray you because you were naive. They betrayed you because they couldn't match your loyalty or your depth. When you shift the meaning, you take your power back. You stop letting your past dictate your perspective. You stop letting fear interpret your experiences. You stop letting negativity decide who you are. You step into a new emotional reality, one where you're in control of your interpretation instead of controlled by it. Think about a moment in your life where something painful eventually became something you grew from. At the time, it felt like the end. You might have been discouraged, defeated, unsure of what was next. But eventually, you look back and realized you needed that moment. It made you stronger. It forced you to change. It taught you something new. You couldn't have learned any other way. That shift didn't happen because the event changed. It happened because the meaning changed. Imagine what your life would feel like if you didn't have to wait years for that shift. Imagine if you chose the empowering meaning now, in the moment, before the pain had time to shape your identity. Imagine if you refused to let negativity take root because you changed the meaning before it ever had the chance. That's what replacing negative meaning is all about. It's taking command of your inner world. It's refusing to let fear, doubt, or past wounds dictate how you interpret new experiences. It's choosing the meaning that moves you forward instead of the meaning that holds you back. Some people resist this because they think the painful meaning feels more true, but it only feels true because it feels familiar. Familiarity is not truth. Familiarity is repetition, and repetition is simply a pattern you've been practicing. Once you practice a new meaning long enough, that becomes your truth. That becomes your emotional home. You get to decide whether your emotional home is built on suffering or strength. You get to decide whether your mind interprets challenges as threats or invitations. You get to decide whether your story is one of defeat or resilience. You get to decide what your experiences mean, and that decision shapes everything. When you start choosing empowering meaning, You stop feeling like life is happening to you and start recognizing that life is happening for you. Not always the way you want, not always in the timing you wish, but always in a way that can serve you if you choose the meaning that lifts you instead of the meaning that limits you. And when that becomes your way of thinking, your emotional patterns shift permanently. You no longer spiral into negativity when something goes wrong. You no longer let fear dictate your future. You no longer carry the heaviness of old interpretations that were never serving you. You start responding to life with clarity, confidence, and strength. You become the one in control, not your circumstances, not your past, not your old story, because the moment you choose a new meaning, you choose a new life. If you're going to release the negative stuff, you have to take a hard look at the environment you're living in, because your environment shapes your state more than you realize. You can be working on your mindset, trying to let go of old pain, replacing negative patterns, choosing empowering meaning, doing everything right internally. But if you keep surrounding yourself with people, places, and habits that drain you, you will always feel like you're fighting uphill. It's like planting a seed in toxic soil and wondering why it isn't growing. You can pour your heart into the process, but the environment will always win. Energy is contagious. We absorb it. We reflect it. We get pulled into it. If you're around people who are constantly complaining, you'll start to feel heavy. If you're around people who live in fear, you'll start shrinking your vision. If you're around people who constantly talk about what they can't do, you'll start feeling like you can't either. You become like the emotional climate you live in. And most people are living in climates that don't match the future they want to create. Think about the people in your life. Some people walk into a room and the energy rises. Others walk in and the energy drops. Some conversations leave you inspired, ready to take action. Others leave you drained, second guessing yourself, or carrying emotions that aren't even yours. Some relationships pull you forward, challenge you, expand you. Others pull you back into old versions of yourself you outgrew years ago. You cannot release negativity and then surround yourself with people who generate more of it. You can't commit to healing if you keep feeding off energies that reopen the same wounds. You can't build confidence while spending time with people who thrive on insecurity. Your environment doesn't just influence you, it conditions you. You've probably had moments where you were feeling good, feeling strong, feeling focused, and then one phone call or one conversation with a certain person completely shifted your energy. One complaint, one passive-aggressive comment, one moment of negativity. Suddenly your mind is spiraling again, not because of your own internal world, but because you absorb someone else's. This is why surrounding yourself with energy that lifts you is not optional. It's essential. You need people who see your potential, not your limitations. People who encourage your growth instead of feeding your fear. People who celebrate your progress, not resent it. People who challenge you, not drain you. People who speak life, not discouragement. People who remind you of who you are, not who you used to be. Some people are not meant to stay in every chapter of your life. And that's not cruelty. That's evolution. As you rise, your standards rise. And when your standards rise, not everyone will rise with you. That's okay. You're not abandoning them. You're choosing alignment. You're choosing peace. You're choosing growth. You're choosing the future version of yourself over the comfort of familiar negativity. But it's not just people. Your habits are part of your environment too. The things you consume, the places you spend time, the routines you follow, they all influence your emotional state. What you listen to, what you watch, what you read, what you scroll, what you repeat, it all becomes part of your internal world. If you're feeding your mind negativity every day, you can't expect to feel positive. If you're staying in spaces that remind you of past pain, you can't expect to feel free. If you're living in routines that drain you, you can't expect to feel energized. Your environment should support the person you're becoming, not the negative patterns you're trying to release. And the moment you become intentional about your environment, everything shifts. When you surround yourself with driven people, you become more driven. When you surround yourself with loving people, you become more open. When you surround yourself with disciplined people, you become more consistent. When you surround yourself with high energy people, your energy rises too. You've felt this before. Think about the moments when you were around someone who inspired you. Their presence alone lifted your state. You thought bigger, you felt bolder, you had clarity you didn't have 5 minutes earlier. That's the power of elevated energy, and you deserve to live in that energy, not occasionally, but consistently. And the beauty is you don't need dozens of people to lift you. Sometimes all it takes is one person who truly believes in you, one voice that speaks possibility into your life, one environment that brings out your best, one habit that changes the tone of your day. Once you get even a small taste of a higher emotional environment, you never want to go back to the one that kept you stuck. But let's be real. Making these changes can feel uncomfortable. Sometimes the people closest to you are the ones contributing the most negativity. Sometimes the habits you're used to are the ones holding you back. Sometimes the places you've always gone are the places keeping you tied to old versions of yourself. And letting go of that requires honesty. It requires courage. It requires choosing growth over familiar comfort. But that discomfort is temporary. The peace you gain is permanent. And you don't have to cut everyone out of your life. You simply need to stop giving your energy to relationships and environments that consistently drain it. You can love someone and still create distance. You can care about someone and still protect your peace. You can respect someone and still stop allowing their negativity into your emotional space. This is not about shutting people out. It's about opening the door for people who match the energy of the life you want to live. Because your environment is not just a reflection of your life, it's the foundation of your emotional hie. And when that foundation is strong, supportive, positive, aligned, everything else becomes easier. You don't have to fight negativity every day. You don't have to struggle to stay in a good state. You don't have to constantly recover from emotional hits. You rise naturally because everything around you supports your rise. This is one of the most powerful forms of releasing negativity, not by forcing it out, but by surrounding yourself with so much positive energy that the negativity has nowhere left to live. Because the moment you surround yourself with energy that lifts you, you stop carrying the energy that weighs you down. If you want to release the negative stuff for good, you can't treat it like a one-time moment. You can't wait for the perfect day or the perfect motivation to finally let go. Real change happens when the release becomes a ritual, when it becomes something you commit to daily, the same way you brush your teeth, the same way you eat, the same way you breathe. A daily emotional reset isn't just a practice, it's a lifeline, because life doesn't stop. Stress doesn't stop. Challenges don't stop. But your ability to reset yourself, your ability to choose how you show up emotionally, that's the difference between living empowered and living overwhelmed. Most people wake up and immediately fall into old emotional patterns. They check their phone before they even take a breath. They absorb the world before they connect with themselves. Then they rush through the day on autopilot, reacting, absorbing, carrying, holding. By the time the evening comes, they don't just feel tired. They feel emotionally overloaded, but they don't realize that the weight they're carrying isn't from the day. It's from days, weeks, months, maybe even years of never resetting emotionally. They've been stacking stress on top of stress, hurt on top of hurt, frustration on top of frustration. And anything you don't release compounds. A daily emotional reset breaks that cycle. It teaches your nervous system that it's safe to let go. It tells your mind you are not your past, you are not your stress, you are not your thoughts. It empties the emotional bucket before it overflows. And when you do that consistently, you start meeting life with clarity, with strength, with presence. A reset doesn't require an hour. It doesn't require perfection. It requires intention. It can be as simple as taking a few minutes every morning to breathe deeply and reconnect with yourself before the world grabs your attention. It can be a moment of stillness, a moment of gratitude, a moment of letting the noise settle so your true self can rise. Some people reset through movement. They use their body to shift their emotional state, because when your body moves differently, your emotions follow. Just a few minutes of stretching, walking, or shaking out your energy can break emotional tension you didn't even realize was sitting inside your chest or shoulders. Some reset through writing. Getting the thoughts out of your head and onto a page clears mental clutter. It frees you from spirals. It gives you distance from your worries. You realize that most of the negative stuff loses power the moment you put it into words. Some reset through gratitude, not as a cliche, not as a forced positive thought, but as a genuine moment of reconnecting with what is real, what is beautiful, what is working. Gratitude isn't about ignoring your challenges. It's about remembering you're bigger than them. You can't feel fear and gratitude at the same time. You can't feel resentment and gratitude at the same time. Gratitude resets your emotional center in seconds. Some people reset through silence, just sitting with themselves, without judgment, without rushing, without needing to fix anything. Silence creates space. And in that space, your mind softens, your emotions settle, and your intuition gets louder. It's in that space where you remember who you really are beneath the noise. It doesn't matter which practice you choose. What matters is that you choose something that anchors you, something that clears you, something that reminds you that every day is a new emotional starting point. Yesterday's pain doesn't have to bleed into today. Yesterday's confusion doesn't have to write today's narrative. Yesterday's mistakes don't have to shape today's decisions. When you reset daily, you stop carrying unnecessary emotional residue. You stop letting little things build into big things. You stop letting fear stack on fear. You stop letting stress compound until it becomes anxiety. You release as you go instead of waiting until you crumble. And the incredible thing is, the more consistently you reset, the less negativity you even accumulate. Your emotional resilience grows. You get better at noticing your patterns. You get better at interrupting them early. You get better at choosing empowering meaning. You get better at letting go of hurt. You get better at surrounding yourself with the right energy. Your emotional baseline rises. Your internal freedom expands. And negativity loses its grip. Not because life becomes easier, but because you become stronger, clearer, more grounded. And here's the truth. Nobody resets perfectly. You're not supposed to. This isn't about becoming some endlessly calm, endlessly positive superhuman. It's about being real, being human, being aware. It's about catching yourself in the moment instead of letting yourself spiral for hours or days. It's about reclaiming your emotional power repeatedly, consistently, intentionally. Some days you'll reset easily. Some days it will feel like a struggle. Some days you'll skip it. Some days you'll need it more than ever. But the commitment is what changes everything. The small moments done consistently transform your entire inner world. Because at the end of the day, releasing the negative stuff is not just a mental shift, it's an emotional habit, a daily choice, a daily ritual, a daily return to your true self. And the moment you make that commitment, every day becomes a new chance to breathe again, to rise again, to begin again,